Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I know it is 9:30 and we have a very full agenda, so we're going to begin. No quorum requirement by the council, and I'm sure we'll be joined by many of council members within the next few moments. But just to begin the process, we just wanted to outline what's going to happen today. We're beginning now with the Public Works Department budget hearing, and then we'll be receiving the capital and debt budget presentation at that later portion. So you have, how much time do you need, Ms. Hutchins? Robin, do you need?
Mr. Chair, this presentation has been planned for 2.5 hours.
2.5, okay. It would be okay if we were less than that, but we expect a full time.
We agree, Mr. Chair.
Good, thank you very much. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and begin if you'd like. We'll call you up if you could introduce yourself. You're new to the city and we welcome you. And you're doing an outstanding job organizing it so far, as well as the enormous public works staff, the generosity that they've showed. So welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Robin Hutchison. I'm the director of the Public Works Department, and I'm very happy to be here today to present our budget. I want to start by, there's going to be a lot of this through this presentation, thanking first and foremost the people sitting behind me here. Lisa Cerny and Brett Jelly have done just an amazing job of preparing me for this presentation today, not just to make the presentation, but to thoroughly understand the budget of the Public Works Department. So thanks very much to Lisa and to Brett. I also want to thank the division directors who each in their own divisions have prepared their own budgets and were able to explain to me their operations very clearly. They are here today to help me to answer specific questions that you have about our budget. I'd like to introduce everyone, if you could just sort of wave a hand. John Sharkbillig with Fleet Services. Jennifer Hager, Transportation Planning and Programming. We have her here. John Wirches, there you are. Traffic and Parking, Don Elwood, Transportation Engineering and Design. Mike Kennedy, Transportation Maintenance and Repair. Dave Herberholz, Solid Waste and Recycling. Glenn Garretts, Water Treatment and Distribution. And Katrina Kessler, Surface Waters and Sewer. I also want to introduce and say thank you to Vicki Stone, our budget manager, who is the master of the detail and who also, along with Brett and Lisa, spent a lot of time preparing me for this presentation. And finally, I just want to thank the department directors for their trust in trusting me to make this presentation today, and to the City Council for their support in these last 5 weeks of employment. Okay, so long introduction. I'm going to start now to talk about our presentation. We have a slight departure from previous years. This will be a bit different. We're going to spend about the first hour, possibly shorter if we can manage it, talking about our operating budget. I will present the department's operating budget. Yes?
Yeah,
oh, it is?
I was about to say that.
You know why? That's why this, it says don't touch the microphone, and we did, and that's what happens.
Thank you very much, Ms. Goodman.
2.5 hours of that would not be pleasant.
I was about to do that, yeah.
Is this better?
Much more tolerable.
Is this better?
Somewhere in between those two would be good. If we have a problem, either if we can't hear you or if we're hearing too much of you,
I'll be gentle.
We'll make sure we'll make a point. But thank you.
So we have a slight departure from previous budgets. And today we've got 3 portions of the presentation. The first of which is the operating budget of the Public Works Department. I will present the operating budget. The second part of our presentation will present the mayor's amended capital paving program, which is the result of the ordinance that was passed in April of last year. And then finally, Mike Abelin from the Finance Department will join us to discuss the capital and debt overview. So moving into the operating budget for Public Works. I'd like to provide some context for you in the form of organizational charts and funding overview, general fund programs, Then I'll move into enterprise, internal service, capital, special revenue fund programs. Each of these will be presented in its own section. One way to make sense of the operating budget is to discuss them in terms of the fund types: general fund, enterprise fund, internal service, capital, special revenue funds. Context for our department is here in our organizational chart. We have 9 divisions covering a wide range of activities organized within the transportation business utility line and the utility business line, and as well business administration, which includes fleet. We do not have any organizational changes included in the mayor's recommended budget for 2017. Our staffing, as proposed in the mayor's recommended budget, remains relatively flat. You'll see here a 4 staff member increase in total. 1 staff member added to surface waters and sewers. 2 in traffic and parking. There's no operational impact to the addition of those 2 positions. They're currently contract. They will be transferred to the operating budget. And lastly, 1 additional position in transportation planning and programming to support the increased capital work. And that will be included in capital positions. It may be helpful to note here that this 948 positions within the Public Works Department does not include additional employees that serve our capital program that are funded by the capital program. There are approximately 150 positions. Okay, we'll move into some numbers now. I'll present next the expense and revenue budgets for the Public Works Department as proposed in the mayor's recommended budget. The expense budget is proposed at $342 million, the majority of which is contained within the enterprise funds. And similarly, the revenue budget, which is proposed at $374.9 million, is also primarily composed of the enterprise funds. So with that context and overview of the revenue expense of the Public Works Department, I'll now talk a little bit in greater detail about each of the fund types within Public Works, beginning with the general fund. Okay, so some more numbers here. Within the general fund, we have the majority of our program work. To help make sense of this, we have provided a table. It's on the next 2 slides. You need not review every single number unless you really want to. I'm going to point out for you where we have some one-time changes here, and it's in the first 2 rows. The first one-time change is an addition of $500,000 to support the operation of the Commons Park. The second one-time request is $325,000 for the continued acceleration of our upgrades of LED streetlights.
Excuse me, Robin, just real quick,
Yes.
just want to check in. Councilmember Goodman, did you have a question or just checking? Okay, thank you. Just wanted to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilmember Reich, who's of course the chair of the Transportation and Public Works Committee, Councilmember Goodman, Councilmember Johnson, Councilmember Palmisano. Thank you. Please continue. Sorry.
No problem. There are a few areas of the operating budget that have seen a little bit of change in our base budgets. And for those, I'll review them as we're working through our program areas, which is coming up next. As you might predict, snow and ice control is our largest single program budget item in the Public Works Department. The mayor's proposed 2017 budget also includes a significant amount of resources to street maintenance and repair and to the traffic program. The remainder of the budget within the general fund is distributed among the program areas in bridge maintenance, transportation planning and programming, and you can see the rest here on the pie chart. So for many of our programs, there is both expense and revenue. And I'd like to cover the revenue side of things with this summary slide here. So for each program, expense and revenue is shown. And revenue within the general fund is largely generated by lane use fees, work for others through agreement. This includes our bridge work, much of our bridge work, snow clearing, and street maintenance and ramps, and also from what is charged by the administration division back to the divisions.
Excuse me, Councilmember Palmisano has a question.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Hutchinson, could you help me understand, or maybe this is more a question for Mike Kennedy, where do the revenues come in from snow? They come from agreements that we clear snow for, like, other, like, county roads and council projects or something like that?
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, Councilmember Palmisano, that's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
So that you understand the activities within each program that is covered by the proposed budget, we have just a bit more information on each program, beginning with administration. The expenditure budget is projected at $3.9 million for 2017. This is where we provide the leadership as well as the support services for the rest of the department. There are no staffing changes proposed within this division.
Could you, if I could, ask a question on this particular slide? I know a lot is happening right now in our new hiring processes. I wonder if you could explain where we're at with that, what's happening today, what's going on.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for that question. We do have a large effort underway right now. There are 4 categories of employment that are now open. There's an opportunity for approximately 40 new people to be hired in the department. And so that we are actively recruiting, we have a fantastic team in the field at close to 15 events throughout the community to actively recruit for these positions. And not only that, to help people to apply for these positions at those events.
That was within the 16 budget, is that correct? Or is that part of the 17 budget plans?
I believe it's both. Yeah,
a little bit of both.
It's both. It was included in 16. It is proposed again for 17.
So I recall when we were constructing the 16 budget, we know we needed a lot of new employees because of some retirements and some expansion of programs. So this is an outcome that comes from that work of 16 that we can directly tie back, and it's certainly really important for our hiring diversity within hiring within the city. The approach that's been taken from the HR side within the department. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that the administration team appreciates hearing that. So while there are no organizational or staffing changes within administration, this is one of the areas where there is a one-time proposed change, $500,000 for operation of Commons Park. The second place you'll see proposed change is to support the acceleration of the LED streetlight replacement program, $325,000. This has been a very successful program over the last year or so. Numerous replacements have taken place. This new $325,000 would convert over 650 fixtures. This is roughly $82,000 a year of savings, and it's recouped over about 4 years.
Yeah, when we first started doing the acceleration, it was, I think, a 6-year payback. So the more money that we can save and then pour that back into the energy savings program is a great investment on our part. Councilmember Pop, is that all? Continue, please. Sorry.
Also within traffic and parking services, this is the traffic program, which operates and maintains all of our traffic control devices. Over 800 signals in the city. It's a lot of signals with an expenditure budget proposed at $9.9 million. Our next program within the general fund budget is bridge maintenance and repair. This is where we do some of the more common activities, including bridge flushing, joint and bearing maintenance on the city's bridges. The proposed expenditure budget is $3 million. Also within street maintenance and repair, this program is really the heart of maintenance and repair, where the city repairs our streets, potholes, including preventative pavement maintenance. This is the seal coating and crack sealing program here. What I want to note in this program is the addition of $800,000 into the operating budget. This was included in the ordinance, the Parks and Streets ordinance, to support the maintenance of streets, primarily for the seal coating program, also for crack sealing as well.
Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for clarification, I think people have gotten used to these sort of treatments, which of course create great value for our assets regarding asphalt streets. But we now are prepared with techniques to actually address concrete streets as well, to get more assets out of them.
Was there a question? I'm sorry.
Oh,
I don't know if everybody's hearing each other. We're having some issues on audio.
Perhaps I could paraphrase Mr. Chair and members of the committee.
I think the fourth estate here, the reporter said I wasn't heard, so I'll repeat the question. So we're very familiar with some of these treatments to get more out of our assets regarding asphalt streets, but we now are prepared with techniques that can address some of our concrete streets, which haven't been addressed in a similar manner for many years. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair,
yes,
and members of the committee, Councilmember Reich, that's correct. And within this $800,000, we are able to also do some of the joint sealing on our concrete streets. This is similar to what someone explained this to me, so I can't take credit for this, but it's similar to what you would do in your home to keep moisture from coming through the surface and damaging the concrete further. So we can now more, in a better way, treat in advance this basic maintenance effort on our concrete streets by doing the joint sealing, crack sealing earlier.
Thank you.
Also within transportation maintenance and repair is the special service districts. There are 15 of these around the city. They're funded by assessment, as you know. There's a distinction here. You'll hear again about special service districts later in our budget. These are the special service districts that are actually managed and operated by the city and therefore are included in our general fund budget. The expenditure here is $2.1 million. Also within transportation maintenance and repair, our snow and ice control program is responsible for removing snow and ice on all city streets. The expenditure budget is the largest within the general fund budget of the Public Works Department. The mayor's proposed budget includes $13.2 million in expense for snow and ice control.
If I could interrupt real quickly, I don't have the exact number in front of me, so maybe Ms. Green, if you could help me. Does this represent a significant change from previous years, or is this new, different in terms of just the anticipated expenditure? Of course, we'll spend what we need to spend, but this is the budget. And does it include the sidewalks and corners that we had talked about in last year as an expansion of that program? Or maybe that's something you could help us with.
Chair Quincy, committee members, this is comparable to what it was last year.
Okay,
in
so that'd be
2016.
just a continuing service level kind of focus. And it would include then the corners and some of the sidewalk treatments that we paid particular attention to in our heavier pedestrian corridors. So thank you.
Transportation maintenance repairs also responsible within the malls and plaza program to maintain green spaces in malls and plazas, as well as bike trails, protected lane maintenance. The mayor's recommended budget is $2.2 million. Also within transportation maintenance and repair, the ramp maintenance and repair program is proposed at $2.8 million to support the operations of both state and city-owned ramps and lots. Okay, well, we are through the transportation maintenance and repair program within the general fund budget, and now we're moving on to transportation engineering and design. The surface transportation management program, you're going to hear it here in the general fund. You'll hear me talk about it again when we talk about operating capital. Here within the general fund, there's an expenditure budget of $1.9 million, which covers the right-of-way permitting and bridge inspection, real estate management, the supportive services of construction in our right-of-way. I'll note here, too, that permits really show us growth of the city. It's one of the ways in which we can predict how quickly the city is growing. We wanted to include this bar chart here to show that we really have had an increase in the utility connections, which tells us quite a lot about growth of our city.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I just noticed issues 3,500 utility connection permits a year. Just wanted to highlight that. And as you just explained, it's really just represents growth in the city. So there's more connections to our systems.
It does. So last but certainly not least, in our general fund budget for public works is the transportation planning and programming program or division. This is a highly visible area of our organization whose responsibilities include long-range transportation planning, the CIP, which you're going to hear more about later today, and many of our large partnership projects with our external agencies. They also take the lead on our community engagement. The expenditure budget proposed is $2.3 million. I'll take just a short pause here now to be sure that there aren't any remaining questions on the general fund portion of the Public Works budget before I move into our enterprise funds.
Okay. Not seeing any. Please continue.
Okay, so this next segment of the operating budget will focus on the mayor's proposed budget for 2017 for each of the 5 enterprise funds within Public Works. So for water treatment and distribution, solid waste and recycling, sanitary sewer, stormwater, and parking, the total expense budget is proposed at $229.9 million. And the mayor's recommended budget for 2017 for revenue is $299.1 million. Similar to the general fund presentation, We'll talk just briefly about each of the enterprise funds, starting with solid waste and recycling. This is one of our most public faces of the city, one that we know our residents care deeply about. The budget includes collection and disposal of solid waste and recycling, organics, yard waste, clean city services, as well as operating the South Transfer Station. And the proposed budget for 2017, Mayor's recommended, is similar to 2016 at $40 million, just over $40 million. Just a few highlights from this program. We're working diligently to grow the participation in the organics program.
What is the status right now of the organics program now that it's fully implemented? I know we had some capital that was built into the program last year. What is the status?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for that question. I think there's some pride in the status of this program right now. Exactly, I don't want to say approximately because we're down to 2 decimal points, 39.93% of all residents have chosen to participate in the organics program. I think we've achieved this participation earlier than was expected. Not resting on laurels, the team is continuing to do outreach in lower participation areas of the city.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so to the proposed rates here, the total recommended rate for a residential monthly bill is proposed at $28.47 per month. This is an increase of 2.1%. However, it is slightly lower than what was projected in the 5-year plan. This is a result of organics coming in slightly lower than what was originally anticipated, about 11 cents lower than what was anticipated.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Glidden has a question.
I was just curious how sort of the participation rate of the organics program overlays with our budget expectations. So, you know, I know we had a certain percent of expectation. We're trying to continue to grow the program. I don't know at what point sort of we're meeting expectations and then we need to kind of add to what we thought was the cost of the program because the program starts to grow, or if we just feel like we're kind of set because we have the system in place and the adding of the residents or participation rate doesn't have that much of an effect.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Glidden, members of the committee, I will start an answer to that, but I may call on David Herberholz, our division director, to fill in some blanks where I may not have all the information. The 2017 proposed budget will cover the cost of the growth of participation. It's what we anticipate. In years beyond that, I believe it will take some evaluation of our budget, just as we do with our other enterprise funds, and projection on 5-year to be sure that we're adapting as the growth continues. And I'll look to David Herberholz to contribute if you'd like.
Yeah, it might be nice to know kind of what's your goal,
Yes,
and then
certainly.
what happens if we exceed that goal.
Certainly. Chair Quincy, Councilmember Glidden, and committee members, Dave Herberholz, Solid Waste and Recycling Director. So we're very excited. The study that we had done prior, that we had a consultant do for organics, talked about a very aggressive goal of possibly getting 40% sign up and participation in the program. So we're there already. And we just finished the implementation of carts to the entire city in mid-June. So right now, there's a lot of variables that we're starting to do some analysis on. One, we're very excited about the participation. The next step is to try to impact the volume set out per participant. It's a little bit lower than what we had anticipated, and I think it's just because of the complexity of the program. I think most people are starting out with what they can manage, and that's, you know, their food scraps. We're trying to get them to then roll into, you know, the soiled papers, meat and bones, and non-traditional organics items. But as far as our cost and the budget shows, we're Our operating expenses for next year are anticipated to be $4 million, and that pretty much includes all the cart purchases that we've made, and just as people go on, we've got replacements that are already budgeted in there for new carts. And the good thing about this too is I think what we're finding is the trend is as more people participate in the organics program, they're finding that they've been able to reduce their, the organic waste that maybe is problematic with their solid waste, traditional solid waste. So they're actually going down to a smaller cart and saving that $3 a month. So that's somewhat of an incentive for the homeowners right now.
And then what do you think's the projection that you have kind of over your 5 years or whatever it is for how the program might grow from 40% to whatever?
Yeah, we haven't really thought about that. We're out there promoting. We want everybody to participate.
Yep.
So we've got a very active our recycling coordinator and program aide, our involvement with neighborhood and community relations and their outreach individuals. They're trying to find out what the barriers are to those that may not be participating, trying to break those down and get everybody to understand that this is included in their base fee, and please participate, and hopefully in the very near or further future impact us moving towards zero waste.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'll continue now to move on to talk about water treatment and distribution. This enterprise fund, we treat 57 million gallons of drinking water per day. If you've not toured the Fridley plant, it is well worth
I'm sorry,
it.
I didn't hear that.
Oh, now I have to be louder? Should I be louder?
Well, yeah.
A little bit louder.
Our Fridley facility and Columbia Heights facility, together we treat 57 million gallons of drinking water per day, and it's quite an operation if you've had a chance to tour it. You see if you haven't toured it. Yes. This enterprise fund also maintains the distribution system, and many of the costs that are built into rates are to support that, both the filtration and distribution of our water. This year we've included or added a new customer. New Brighton will be on Minneapolis Water until their facility improvements are completed, which adds a bit of revenue assumption to the budget here.
Excuse me, Ms. Hutchinson. I know we've made some capital projects along in the water treatment area. Are we experiencing any cost savings, cost expansions, and are our customers experiencing any drinkability, odor, taste changes?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'll start with your second part of the question first. The proposal here, the mayor's proposed budget includes an upgrade to the filtration system using granulated activated carbon. From time to time, organics in the river during high runoff can affect odor and taste, not quality, odor and taste. And we believe that that problem will be eliminated with the granular activated carbon filtration. To the first part of your question, there's some capital investment being made in both filtration and in distribution that will show on this next slide in the rates. These are investments that are necessary regardless of the amount of water that is sold.
Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll just add that we're also investing in what I consider to be a double redundancy. We're trying to get redundancy in terms of how we treat water. We have two different ways to treat water for health and safety, in addition to water quality. And I would also say that we're working towards having redundancy in terms of source, to have backup systems in place if we were to have a source, our main source failure. So we're investing in the long range, is my understanding, let alone the short range. And yes, it's very significant that we picked up a new customer. They're a very happy customer. They really had to really understand. The mayor of New Brighton, Valerie Johnson, really went out of her way to understand what our water quality is about, our system, our sources, so she could go back to her public and convey that. And I think she was able to get a lot of great information thanks to the staff who gave her the information she needed. we do have an incredible system, but we have to keep maintaining it and moving it forward. So I think this budget reflects that forward movement.
Thank you.
Okay, the mayor's recommended budget includes $57 million within this enterprise fund. Some highlights from the program looking forward, implementing an asset management program. This is the Maximo program. You'll hear about this twice during this presentation, as well as what we've just been talking about, targeted investment and rehabilitation. The proposed rate for the residential average monthly bill is $28.71. This is a 3.8% increase and is the same as what was proposed in the 5-year plan. Okay, moving on to our third enterprise fund, the third of 5, sanitary sewer. A quick summary of our activities that are covered by this budget area. This is capital and maintenance activities for our sanitary pipe. Some of them date as far back as to 1870, and as well sanitary tunnels and pump stations. I want to highlight here that this enterprise funds includes our payment to Met Council for the sanitary treatment, and you'll see those ripple through the budget and the rates. So this year we're seeing an increase of the Met Council rates of 3.6%. The mayor's recommended budget reflects that at $61 million. Some other highlights will be implementing an asset management framework. I fully expect that exactly this time next year we'll be able to talk with you about better information and data of our sanitary sewer system. The proposed rate for 2017 is $26.10 per month for a residential unit. This is the same as what was proposed in the 2016 5-year plan that was presented. And I'd like to note, just circling back to a few slides ago, this includes the increase in fees paid to Met Council.
Yeah.
Also within the Surface Water and Sewers Division, the 4th of 5 enterprise funds will talk about stormwater. The responsibilities here include capital and maintenance activities of all of our stormwater pipe and tunnels and ponds and pump stations. I've had a chance to spend some time with Katrina Kessler, and the work here is really outstanding, especially to understand where we have spot issues and what potential fixes, be they short or long term, we can really look at. So this is a 2-part enterprise fund where it includes both stormwater, the collection and the treatment, as well as our street cleaning activities, which support our cleaning of the stormwater. These two programs together are at $28 million, proposed at $28 million, just over $28 million. We will continue to leverage our street construction projects to address known problem areas as we move forward.
Robin, I just wanted to check this. Is 2017's recommendation for that budget actually less than 2016 adopted? Does that reflect some sort of right sizing, actualization? Looks like it does. Not in the monthly. I'm back on slide 38.
Yes, I can go back there.
Just wanted to highlight
Mr.
that.
Chair and members of the committee, I think I'm going to call a lifeline in, and perhaps Vicki or Brett or Katrina. Katrina was halfway up. If Katrina could join me just for a moment here.
I think it's
Thank
just
you.
a matter of math.
Let's verify with our division director.
council members and chair, yes, the decreases has to do with debt payments being paid off, as well as just right sizing the program over time.
There's no change in the staffing levels?
No.
So we should celebrate and have cupcakes or something. This is great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Martina, thanks.
I miss cupcakes.
Okay, so the proposed rate for stormwater is $12.36 a cost per month for the average household, which is a 3.5% increase. There is a bump here from 2016. This accounts for a transfer of funds that will support the increase in street maintenance, the $800,000 increase in street maintenance. There's a portion of every street that supports stormwater, the curb and the gutter. And so that is accounted for here and transferred out to support additional maintenance of our streets.
Is the Adopt a Drain program funded through this?
The adopted what?
Adopt a Drain?
Is
That's
Mr.
part
Chair,
of-
yes.
That's terrific. That's a great program.
To summarize these 4 enterprise funds, the total change is shown here, the current 2016 and the proposed 2017 from 92 to 95. There is an increase in the stormwater by 42 cents, which is offset in a decrease in solid waste by 11% for a total increase of 31 cents. Increase of $3.52. Let me correct myself.
Councilmember Wright has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a little bit extended from the current presentation, but as we look forward and we see the interrelationship between water and our street repair, I think the other side of the coin is also going to be something we're going to consider moving forward that might go beyond how we source funds for water. If we're going to accelerate reconstructs, that's the opportunity, and we do say the pillar of our reconstructs are opportunities to do our full system. Things that are under the roads are going to have to be addressed in a way that are way accelerated beyond what we've been able to do. And we're at one way or the other, and I'm not going to opine how we do that moving forward. We're going to have to account for that and make sure that we have a budgetary allotment that addresses this increased road repair will mean increased sewer repair. So just a heads up moving forward.
Right. Thank you.
Final enterprise fund, the parking system, operating 17 ramps and 6 lots and over 7,500 metered spaces around the city. This enterprise fund is divided into 3 particular areas: on-street parking, off-street parking, and the impound lot. The mayor's recommended budget for 2017 is $40 million. That increase is largely to cover an improved security system at both the ABC ramps and for the city ramps.
Excuse me, Ms. Hutchins, I just wanted to check in. Ms. Green, don't mean to put you on the spot. This is the expense portion of the budget. Can you tell me how the income side, the revenue side is on the parking fund? Or was that covered in the enterprise funds earlier that I missed? How's the parking fees doing, collection?
The parking fees, I'm sorry, Chair Quincy, committee members, the parking fees are looking okay as far as the budget, but I'm assuming that we will get through the more of the enterprise. I don't want to jump into Public Works budget.
Okay.
Right?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, to your question, we've seen an increase in revenue due to the mobile parking app to the tune of about $900,000. I think the on-street system is settling out nicely from what I can see and in my discussions with John Wirchus, and it's relatively new. We'll be tracking how revenue is affected over time.
Right. So when we're looking at an expense budget increase. We know why it's increasing. It's for that security measures that we're putting in those lots, but that's balanced off by the revenue side. I just wanted to highlight that, and I think we can get into it more when we look at the enterprise fund performance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, we have covered the general fund budget. We have covered the enterprise fund budget. We're now moving into the internal service funds. I'd like to take another pause here and make sure we're covering any questions on the enterprise. I think we've covered it. Mr. Chair, any additional questions there?
I'm not seeing any further questions, but I would like to highlight to my colleagues that I am using speaker management. It's a little hard for me to see some of them, but if that's convenient, that would, either way, we'll be able to get questions answered. Just wanted to say that, as well as being joined by Council members, Council Vice President Glidden, Council Member Bender, and that's it so far.
Great. Moving into internal service funds now. These are just as they sound. This is our ability to service other departments in areas of the city. This is primarily fleet services. There are a few other internal service funds that I will cover in just a moment. But fleet services is our major internal service fund within Public Works. The program includes management and acquisition of all rolling stock for the city. There's over 1,800 cars and light trucks, and hundreds of thousands of gallons of fuel consumed each year. So within fleet management, the program includes management and field support as well as operations. This is to ensure that our rolling stock is functional for all departments of the city. The mayor's proposed budget is slightly decreased from almost $34 million to $31.6 million. The primary reason for this is cost of fuel has decreased.
Can't disagree with that. I think that's great.
Right.
I don't have a lot.
We do have a couple of other internal service funds, areas that we serve the city with. One is in construction management. This is a materials lab where we test asphalt and other materials. We also
Sure. I'm sorry.
Yes.
If I could interrupt real
Sure.
quick. Council Vice President had a quick question.
I just wanted to go back to fleet for a second. So I know in fleet services, over a significant amount of time, we've had a lot of investment in, there you are, kind of the green economy and updating our vehicles and turning to looking at different types of fuel sources and those kinds of things. And I just want to know if you could make any comment just about what percent of our fleet has been touched by those kinds of programs and those kinds of upgrades, and if those have produced cost savings we should be aware of, or how they've affected our overall expense and operation.
Mr. Chair and Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee, I'm going to start this one, and then I'm going to ask, I think, Brett or John to come up and supplement my answer. I am going to start with a more general answer to this, in that this is something that is an active discussion within the department and within Fleet Services Division. And as our vehicles are turned over, we know that we do have the opportunity to replace them with an alternate fuel type. Electric is our first thought. To your question about what percent has been upgraded and if there's been an overall effect, I'll ask for some detail from Mr. Sharp-Billig.
Welcome. Please
Welcome.
introduce me.
John Sharp-Billig, Director of Fleet Services. Mr. Chair and members of the council, we have gone to primarily more E85 vehicles, primarily in our fleet in the police department. We are looking presently at CNG for our solid waste, as well as looking at electric vehicles that would go into our general fleet services area for regulatory services, public works, and in these areas. The types of cost savings we're seeing in the vehicles are pretty much offset by the cost of the vehicle itself. We're not seeing real major savings. A lot of the alternative fuels are designed for the on-road fleet. The off-road fleet isn't moving quite as fast as the on-road fleet, so we're not seeing the big savings that we were hoping to see.
And are we measuring just savings in terms of kind of CO2 emissions and those kinds of things?
Underneath the city's green fleet policy, we measure on an annual basis our green fleet output for carbon coming out of the tailpipe emissions. We only use SmartWay EPA vehicles that are rated 7 or higher. And are we seeing a decrease? No, we're actually seeing an increase in our carbon output because we are burning more fuel because of the type of operations that are going on in the city with the improving economy and the number of construction projects and the amount of equipment we have out there.
So in other words, kind of an increase in just stuff we need to do.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but
Anything-
if that could be balanced somehow over, miles or hours or something, then you'd probably see a reduction at the marginal level. But the more you do, it's going to be, it's going to produce more greenhouse.
Correct. One of the things that we've instituted this year, we've gone to an AVM system to actually monitor our vehicles for idling. And hopefully with that system, we'll be able to see which vehicles are idling and be able to reduce that, which will also help us reduce our tailpipe emissions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
I think I left off on our remaining 2 internal service funds, construction management, primarily the lab, paving lab, and field inspection survey crew, and also the traffic store, which is exactly like it sounds. This is the ability for anybody in the department or the city to obtain traffic control, barricades, cones, what they need. So these recommended budgets are shown here and are very similar to 2016. Remaining questions, Mr. Chair, on internal service funds before I move to the next fund category, capital programs. I want to just describe what this is because it took me a moment to work out capital versus operating here. And the best way to describe the capital programs is these are the resources needed within the Public Works Department to complete our capital program. Within capital programs, there are 3 activities: surface transportation capital, sidewalks, and then transportation planning and programming. So surface transportation capital resides in Don Elwood's group. This is the engineering design as required for our capital program. You'll see an increase here from 2016 to 2017, as well as a slight increase in sidewalk. So this supports directly the increase that we're anticipating as a result of the expanded capital improvement program for streets. And then that transportation planning and programming, I'm going to tie us all the way back to the very first bar chart I showed you about staffing. This is the additional staff member in transportation planning and programming that supports directly the implementation of our capital program. Okay, the last fund category within Public Works that I will address today is the Special Revenue Fund. So there's really just one program within our Special Revenue Fund. It's Special Service District. These are divided out from the general fund because they are self-managed improvement districts. And this is the Downtown Improvement District and the West Broadway Special Service District. The budget from 2016 remains relatively the same between 2016 and the mayor's recommended for 2017. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I've worked through each of our major fund categories within Public Works, General Fund, Enterprise, Internal Service, Capital, and finally Special Revenue. And I'd like to open it up for remaining questions that you have about the mayor's proposed 2017 Public Works budget.
Not seeing any. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Sure.
Oh, I don't get to go yet. Okay, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm going to move on to part 2 of 3 of the overall budget presentation for the Public Works Department today. And that is the presentation of the mayor's recommended amended 20-year streets funding plan for 2017 to 2022. I'm going to introduce this portion, and I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Hager, who will present the substance of the work. And I'd like to just start by recognizing Mayor Hodges and members of the City Council for their tremendous leadership in passing the Parks and Streets Ordinance last year. This is no small feat. It took a tremendous amount of political leadership and community leadership, and the result, you'll see, will make a difference in the quality of life for the residents of the city. I have worked with many councils. I can compare what this action has brought to your city with many other cities, and you are at the forefront. So I want to commend you on your leadership, both Mayor Hodges and the City Council. I also want to take an opportunity to recognize Jennifer Hager and her team. They squeezed what I think is 18 months of work into about 4 or 5 months in order to present to you today an approach to the next several years of capital improvements. Jenny and Nathan Koster and Kathleen Mayell, along with the Kimley Horn consulting team, really was a monumental effort on their part, and I want to commend them for their work. Their dedication will show in the work that you are about to see. So I'm now going to pass the baton. You've heard my voice for long enough, and I'd like to introduce Jennifer Hager.
Welcome, Ms. Hager. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. Thank you. Jennifer Hager, Transportation Planning and Programming. Here I have the pleasure today to present to you the amended capital program with a focus on the street paving program. So last week I had the opportunity to present to the Transportation and Public Works Committee a summary of the process that we went through over the summer and the criteria that we came up with. We'll review some of that here today, and then we'll go into more detail about what the amended capital improvement program includes. Just starting a little bit with our timeline. As you all know, the street funding ordinance was passed in April. We began work immediately. Our first month of work was focused on data collection and information gathering. We also did a fair amount of research across the nation. We wanted to understand what other agencies were doing in terms of project selection processes and criteria. And so we spent some time looking at other examples. In the month of June, we engaged with the city's Office of Equity and Inclusion and the Department of Neighborhood and Community Relations to develop a framework for community engagement around the ordinance requirement for a focus on racial and economic equity. The months of July and August were spent carrying out that plan, but also beginning to craft and develop our own criteria. In September, we pulled all of that work together and we did the analysis and we developed a recommended amended 5-year, it's going to be a 6-year capital improvement program, which brings us here today, which is one of the very first milestones in a very long process. We have a 20-year street funding program. We know the world will change over 20 years. We know that we will need to change with that. So to that end, we have set up a process that will allow us to track, evaluate, report, and refine as we go forward. This will offer us the opportunity on an annual basis to update our data, to update our criteria, to continue to incorporate public feedback, to make process improvements, to review how the program is delivered and to be able to report on our progress. Our work over the summer was driven by two overarching principles. One, that our process to prioritize and select street projects would be data-driven. And two, that we would have the ability to seize and create opportunities. So we developed a criteria-based selection process with a focus on racial and economic equity. We know that we want to maintain the overall condition of our city streets. We want to have a process to have ongoing updates and annual reporting. And we want to be able to continue to incorporate feedback. This graphic shows what our process is. It starts with a data-driven analysis that is 90% of the effort. And it concludes with the final 10% of work, which is the application of a qualitative lens. That gives us a recommended capital improvement program. A review of what our criteria is that we came up with. Asset condition. This is all about the physical condition of the roadway. It includes pavement condition index, safety, and utility needs. So we're looking at the condition above ground as well as below ground. Equity was broken into two different subcategories, community demographics and uses and mode. Community demographics included two geographic-based criteria, areas of non-white majority and areas of concentrated poverty. It also included consideration of vehicle availability by household and potential users. Potential users are measured by looking at population density and things like regional destinations, educational institutions, job employment centers. Essentially, where are the people and where do they want to go? Uses in mode is where we overlay our modal plans from Access Minneapolis and any service improvement plans that our transit provider might have. It looks at total users of the system, and it overlays all of that with our recently adopted Complete Streets policy, where we have a modal hierarchy embedded within there. This criteria gives us a list of potential projects that we then qualitatively ask ourselves, are there other nearby projects that will also be under construction? Can projects be combined to reduce disruption or cost? Is this the right fix at the right time? Have we addressed known city priorities and goals? And do other agencies or utilities have projects that can be coordinated? This is the criteria, this is the process that we used to develop the amended capital improvement program. That work also included a set of key assumptions. First, that all projects already within the recommended capital improvement program would stay in the recommended capital improvement program. Second, that in 2017 and 2018 primarily, we would focus on accelerating existing projects within the program up, rather than introducing new projects in those first 2 years. Why? This is all about project deliverability. On average, it takes us 2 to 3 years to complete project development and design to deliver these projects. This is also a little bit about the right project at the right time. Some of our projects could not move within the program because they have outside funding sources that are tied to a specific program year. Third, we focused on street reconstruction in the development of the amended program. And fourth, we are going to show you a 6-year capital program rather than a 5-year program. We felt that it was important to show that 6th year to really indicate the impact of this new money. Before we get into this chart, I just want to remind everyone that we are focused today on the street paving program. That is where the amendments happened as a result of the new street funding, 20-year street funding plan. But the capital improvement program does include more than just street projects, and those are all still in that program that's moving forward. So we have provided today some statistics to help demonstrate the anticipated impact of this money as it relates to some of our criteria. This is just a sampling of what we will be able to measure and report on an annual basis. percent of projects within an ACP 50. This is not a before and after chart. The green bar is showing you that approximately 23% of our city streets lie within an ACP 50 area. The blue bar chart is showing that about 40% of the projects we are recommending will lie within an ACP 50. A quick review of where the ACP 50s are and what they are in the city. The yellow on this map are showing areas with a non-white majority, blue areas of low-income population, and green, where the two areas overlap, are the ACP 50s, areas of concentrated poverty with a non-white majority, formerly known as racially concentrated areas of poverty.
Council Vice President Glidden, please.
Yeah, and I had the opportunity to just see a little bit about this term before, and I was just curious if you could say something about why you're using this term ACP 50. Is that where kind of other planning organizations are starting to kind of call these areas, or what's our reason for using that methodology as opposed to what the Met Council used with the RCAPS language?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Glidden, this is language that's used throughout the region. So regionally, Met Council has also shifted from using the term RCAP to now ACP 50.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mileage of street reconstruction. In the 2017 to 2021 capital improvement program, we proposed a total of 17 miles of street reconstruction. With the amended 2017 to 2022 capital improvement program, we're proposing a total of 46 miles of street reconstruction. Granted, that's a 6-year program versus a 5-year program, but that's still a 170% increase in mileage of street reconstruction projects. Street reconstruction projects offer us the greatest opportunity to make functional changes to our streets, and that's demonstrated with the next two statistics. Opportunities to make improvements to the pedestrian realm. In the 2017 to 2021 capital improvement program, we assert that all 17 miles of street reconstruction would have offered us the opportunity to improve the pedestrian realm. In the 2017 to 2022 CIP, some of our street reconstruction mileage is on low volume residential streets that for the most part have narrow street widths with established boulevards and sidewalks. We do not anticipate significant changes to the pedestrian realm in that context. Therefore, we're focusing this projection on the opportunities presented along commercial or arterial corridors where the volumes are greater, not just the traffic volumes, but the pedestrian volumes. So in the 2017 to 2022 capital improvement program, we're proposing a total of 33 miles of street reconstruction where opportunities to improve the pedestrian realm exist, a 94% increase in that opportunity. We're also looking at where we have synergy with our protected bikeway plan. The capital program still includes BIK 28, the protected bikeway program. The chart you see here shows where we will have the opportunity to implement a protected bikeway along with a street reconstruction project, or where we can improve the design of an existing protected bikeway as a result of the street project. This mileage does not represent what will be implemented through the BIK 28 program. I believe that's expected to be an additional 20 miles over the next 5 years through that program. In the 2017 to 2021 capital improvement program, we had 3.8 miles of street reconstruction that aligned with our protected bikeway network. In the 2017 to 2022 CIP, we're proposing a total of 5.8 miles of street reconstruction on protected bikeway corridors, a 53% increase in that opportunity.
Ms. Hager, quick question. This data you're presenting, does that just include the city of Minneapolis streets, or how does that blend in with what we might be doing at the county level or even state roads?
Mr. Chair, thanks for the question. These projections are based on what we're proposing in our own capital improvement program. So these are based on where we're going to have a street reconstruction project. It would not include projects where we're coordinating with Hennepin County, for example, and those likely would be implemented through the BIK 28 program that I referenced. There's, I think, an additional 20 miles of protected bikeway over the next 5 years that will be implemented through the BIK 28 program.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to say how really wonderful it is to see this level of coordination between our bicycle and pedestrian safety programs and our capital budget. And it seems like a no-brainer, but it's been an evolution over the past many years, I think, of even coordinating with different staff within the department. And it's actually been, I think, a significant amount of work to get to this point. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank you all for doing that. I wanted to kind of go back to the questions and conversation we had a bit at TPW when you gave the higher level overview about how we're looking at pedestrian realm improvements within these projects versus something that we would do more as a standalone project. And I asked partly because I think pedestrian improvements can be more expensive and challenging. And so could you just talk more about how you looked at opportunities to incorporate pedestrian safety into these projects? And then you had started to give a bit more information at TPW about our kind of bigger strategy around pedestrian safety.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. We know that when we have a street reconstruction project, essentially everything from right-of-way line to right-of-way line comes into play, and it allows us to take a closer look at what the design of the street should be and make geometry changes there. And so that's where we really have the greatest opportunity to change and improve the pedestrian realm, which has direct impacts on the livability of a street. So that's where this projection comes from, is where do we have those street reconstruction projects? We know there are still some standalone needs, and we continue to look at those as well through other programs in the capital budget. You referenced, we're trying to get ourselves poised to be able to make the right improvements at the right time. So the pedestrian master plan, one of our oldest components of Access Minneapolis, has listed basically a series of problem statements. These are the most challenging locations in the city from a pedestrian standpoint. And it doesn't have readily available in that plan the right solution at those locations. And so we have been working to identify the right solution at those locations and other locations that might have been identified through some of our stakeholders, in particular the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, so that when these opportunities come forward through the capital improvement program, whether it's through a street reconstruction project or a standalone project, we know what the right design should be, and we're ready to seize and create that opportunity to implement that design. So that's where we're working towards. So this is just an idea of some of the things that we are setting ourselves up to be able to track and report on. And now we can take a look at the impact of this new money on a map. This first map is showing you the 2017 to 2021 paving program as it was proposed by Public Works earlier this year. Everything in yellow, these are just the paving projects that were proposed in the 5-year capital program, along with what had been the total budget that was estimated. And now we add on the red corridors, which is what we are able to add into the program with the new 20-year street funding. So this is just the first 6 years of the 20-year plan, but it's showing you how much we're able to add and fill in on this map. I'm just going to pause for a second and let you look at that a little bit.
I just wanted to, while we're reviewing this, I remember Councilmember Reich earlier talking about concrete street changes. And I think, I'm guessing a lot of this red is things we wouldn't have been able to touch before without the addition of the revenues. And we're going to focus on some of the concrete streets that we hadn't been able to get to. Is that correct? Or am I just guessing here?
Oh, Mr. Chair, committee members, we have been working towards implementation of the concrete rehabilitation program, and that is reflected on this map. So we have been doing some pilot projects over the last few years to understand how to approach that work and to build our expertise on that. And we are ready to implement that. So you're seeing that on the map. We're now able to go in and rehabilitate some of these areas that we haven't been able to get to.
Thank you. Council Vice President Glidden had a comment.
So just kind of going from memory, my belief is several of those yellow sections were repaving projects.
particularly the ones that look like they're multiple streets in a residential area. So of the red, you know, I thought the red was going to be primarily something other than repaving projects. So maybe could you explain what types of projects are included in the red? And then how we'll continue to evaluate, are these the right? So these would include the ones of just moving up the program. I guess that's my other question. Are these just moving up the program to get done sooner, or does this include any new things that weren't yet proposed as part of our capital improvement plan?
Mr. Chair, committee members, it's a little bit of both, and we have some of that detail for you in the appendix materials that you got with your presentation. We are proposing to hold steady our asphalt resurfacing program at somewhere between 25 and 35 miles a year. We're holding that program steady. That's the PV 056 program that you see in the capital program. We are adding in concrete rehab. That's a new thing, and that's some of the areas that you're seeing in red here. But we were very, very focused on introducing reconstruction projects with this new 20-year street funding money. And so some of these, a lot of these projects, and you saw the difference in the mileage, 17 miles to 46 miles, are new reconstruction projects. With the way that we are looking at our data now and the way that we are going to be gathering our data in the future, we are going to be taking a closer look at these neighborhood areas and identifying the right fix at the right location. So instead of assuming that a full neighborhood area should be resurfaced, if there's a particular street or set of streets within a neighborhood area that is in poorer condition than the rest of it, we will be able to go in and identify that corridor for a reconstruction versus a resurfacing, which is not something that we have previously done. And so some of those are also targeted on this map as reconstruction rather than resurfacing.
So that actually reminds me of something else. So you kind of touched on this, but I kind of want to dig into that a little bit. So I've had a project that happened in my ward that I think is part of a fairly new program within Public Works where you were doing this more targeted look. So there are some areas in my ward that, were previously marshland, and so really have a tendency to sink. And so there was a project that was done that was, I think, less than a full block project, actually, of more intensive work on curb and gutter and things like that, because the whole, area is sinking with terrible standing water and those kinds of things. So are those the kind of projects where you're going to look at kind of a more focused look? Or I would also put into that bucket where you have pedestrian issues that kind of have to do with how the street is operating. So I'm just curious what might go into that kind of bucket of things that you're now considering, knowing even though we got a big program, we still only have so much money to spend. So I understand there's, trade-offs and that kind of stuff.
Mr. Chair, committee members, the program you're referring to for the project that was recently completed in your ward was completed out of the PV 059 Failed Streets program. That program is still within our capital budget and will still move forward, and it's targeted at exactly what you described. Those failed street segments, generally less than a full block long, that need to be addressed with a greater scope than a resurfacing project. For the projects that we're now recommending a reconstruction on that might be part of a larger residential neighborhood area, we will identify those segments by using the same criteria that we just discussed. It will look at asset condition, but it will also look at the equity criteria. So your question about pedestrian functionality is part of that equity and asset condition criteria and will come into play in determining which segments would be reconstructed versus resurfaced.
Good. I just wanted to touch on one other thing as Council Vice President reminded me here. This is an expansion of the paving program. And I just want to tie it back to the maintenance program. How does that look when you have a 5-year seal coat after a resurfacing? Have we included that expansion of the maintenance issues itself?
Mr. Chair, committee members, so the Transportation Planning and Programming Group is also involved in helping to define where the seal coating projects occur. And so it's fully coordinated with where we're planning for our capital improvement projects. We're also taking a look at the best practices in terms of when a seal coat should happen in order to maximize the life of that asset. So where we hadn't been seal coating before after a resurfacing project, for example, we're taking a look at how that would work for us to include that after resurfacing now. Maybe the first year after resurfacing, what impact does that have on the life expectancy of that asset? And we are going to be bringing forward some recommendations with respect to some of our asphalt programs, similar to what we did recently with some of our concrete programs.
Thank you. Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can expand on that notion. In many years past, when we first developed our 30-year, 40-year commitment to a modern street system for our city, shortly after that, we were able to touch, so to speak, every street. We were able to look at it on an annual basis and say, what little needs did it have? Did it need a little touch on the crack? Did it need a little seal here, a little there? And we're now, because we're not really creating a new program, we're now just be able to step up our commitment to our existing assets. We're now able to go back to that notion where we can look at every street every year and give it what it needs at that time. To just put in simple layman's terms. That's what we're really talking about here.
Right. Thank you for that. Ms. Hager.
Thank you. So now let's take a closer look at 2017, which is the program year that the council will be asked to adopt in December. We're showing here the major work that was originally in the 2017 capital improvement program and the one reconstruction project that we have recommended to be accelerated into 2017, 42nd Avenue North from Xerxes to Lindale. And we're also showing where we have identified a area of concrete streets for the concrete rehab program up in Waite Park. So these are the 2017 projects, paving projects that we're recommending. And this shows you the 2017 program by numbers.
So the red portion is the amendment, new change, and the yellow is the existing CIP.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The fact it's up in Northeast has nothing to do with Councilmember Reich being the chair of the committee, right?
I think it has a lot to do that those roads were done in the 60s.
Yeah.
And they haven't been touched since.
Yeah, I know. It is. It does apply through our regular process.
Okay. We also felt it was important to be able to show you our recommended capital improvement program and also overlay recently accomplished work. So the recently accomplished work is shown for you here in green. And this just kind of shows you the geographic balance that we have in our investments throughout the city in paving projects. And then I just want to bring this all back to the process and the criteria that we have come up with. This amended 5-year program is a result of this process and this criteria. And this is what we are recommending for you right now. And I'll stand for any questions that the committee might have.
Sager, I'm not seeing any. Is okay? I think we're ready. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we're going to move on to the third portion of our budget, mayor's recommended budget proposal today, which is a presentation by Mike Abelin, and I'll introduce Mike now.
Welcome, Mr. Abelin. Please feel free to take whatever transition time you need.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Mike Abelin from the Finance Department. I'm the Director of Capital and Debt Management for the city. And I need a minute to get set up here. As we go through this presentation, there are page references to the mayor's recommended capital book. The G section is capital. So if you want to look at details behind the summarized slides, you can toggle back and forth with your online view of the budget and see more detail. So I did provide that. So basically, I'm going to talk about the 2017 through 21 Mayor's Recommended Capital Improvement Program. And then I'm going to switch to the debt service statistics and the 2017 debt service budget, and then open up anything for questions. So in the 5-year plan this year, we have the largest allocation of resources we've ever had since I've been doing this, at almost $907 million. You can see where the dollars are allocated there, largely public works at about 83% of the budget, and park board at 7%, and public grounds and facilities at 6.6%. So a fairly large program this year. I did a little research before I came up here and noted that in 2016, that 5-year total was $668 million by comparison. 2015 was $572 million, and 2014 was $592 million. So you can see at this $907 million, it's a very, very large increase, and that has to do with the plans I'm going to talk about, the street infrastructure and parks plan, but there's also some very large water projects and stuff going through the program right now. In terms of funding for the 5-year high-level plan, you can see that about 18% of this project total is from enterprise revenues and another 18% from bonds. So in our sewer, water, solid waste, etc., enterprise and parking, about half of their expenditures are covered with bond funds, and the other half are pay-as-you-go cash sources. So those are two big ones. The net debt bonds in the 5-year plan is about 27%. And I'm going to talk more about transfers in a minute. And then special assessments and municipal state aid are some of the other larger sources. In terms of the 2017 plan, the amount for 2017 funding is $197 million. And again, you can see that Public Works is a large part of this, but they're not 83% in the 2017 plan. They're about 70%. So one of the big areas that's a little bit unusual for 2017 is the public grounds and facilities. We have a lot of police and fire station projects and a warehouse for the police property and evidence stuff going through in 2017. So a little bit larger public grounds and facilities portion for 2017. And here are the funding sources for the 2017 plan. So you can see a different distribution here for 2017. Net debt bonds is 22 versus 27. And you can see a little bit higher enterprise bonds than we do in the 5-year plan because, like I said, there's a Fridley filter plant rehabilitation going on that is a very long-term asset that has a little bit more bonding than other years of their program.
And I'm just thinking of a couple things. One is, this is just using bonds, right? I mean, if you're using cash or if you're using enterprise funds to support those bonds, are they factored in as well? I'm thinking of the water plant stuff that you're talking about earlier. I'm also thinking about like Roof Depot, other things. Is the source of how we're going to pay those bonds considered or factored into this chart?
Mr. Chair, this is how the capital projects will be paid for initially when they are constructed. So in other words, we will be using bonds issued for the enterprise funds. And then over time, utility fees will come in to pay back those bonds over time.
Okay.
So it's just the upfront source to get the project work completed and the expenditures incurred on the books.
Everything else is just how to pay that debt.
Correct. And the enterprise revenues is using cash that's in the funds to actually pay expenses that are currently being incurred.
Thank you.
Okay. For 2017, the non-property tax supported or the property tax supported net debt bond allocation is a little over $43 million. So this is a larger than we've had in the past allocation of net debt bonds, largely attributed to the new streets and parks infrastructure program, which we'll have some slides on. Again, the big factors are Public Works and Park Board for good reason. In terms of 2017's budget, the things that are not property tax supported, some of the larger ones there are the water fund. Like I said, they have some large projects going through. And also solid waste has a large building facility project that's in the mix this for 17. And the stormwater fund has some big work going on. So just a breakdown of those sources. Here's the street infrastructure and neighborhood parks plan. So in total, a little over $150 million have been added into the 5-year program, $8 million each year into neighborhood parks, and from 21 to about $23 million per year added in to the streets infrastructure program. And this is on top of things that were in their normal requests. So this is just a portion of the dollar amounts for street work. How that's paid for in the 5-year plan is, if you look at the net debt bonds is the largest portion of that, between the Park Board getting $8 million extra each year, and then the street infrastructure program ramping from $5.2 million up to $10 million. So that's $78.5 million of that $150 in total. And then stormwater is also funding a little over $1.5 million each year of the streets infrastructure program. So as we do street work, there's stormwater work that needs to happen as well. And then the rest of that is the transfers area. So this is use of city cash in funds over time that we believe are able to be utilized to make these capital improvements. So pretty significant pay-go component to the first 5 years. As we get into this program a little bit more, we'll see more bonding and more other sources coming in, including actually property taxes actually helping to pay some of the later years after the TIF is consolidated TIF district goes away. Any questions before I move on?
I think we're okay. Please continue.
Okay. Some of the other areas of the budget, Municipal Building Commission is funded roughly half and half. It's for this building that we're in. So they have about an $8.5 million allocation for 17 and about double that in the 5-year plan. Their project is primarily net debt bond funded on our side, and then the county provides their resources for their half. The Park Board has several projects in the 5-year plan. You can see I've got in green highlight there the neighborhood parks capital infrastructure. That's the large sort of generic project that I put all the dollars in. They will further define those into individual projects in their realm, just like Public Works will break that street information out into individual projects as the budget process goes on this year. Public Works Department, it's, they have so many projects, it's impossible to try and cover them all in a brief presentation. But what I do each year is take their 10 largest individual projects or programs. So you can see the asphalt pavement resurfacing, that's again is in green because that's where the large dollars from this new program were put in. So that project has $145 million in the 5-year plan, or about $28 million for 2017, and they will be breaking that out before council adopts the final budget. I talked a little bit about that Fridley filter plant rehabilitation. You can see in the 5-year plan there's $44.5 million allocated to that, and there's actually some money already in 16, so that's a very large project that they're working on currently. And then the other big areas are the storm drains and tunnels. not that large of an amount in 17, but as we get in the out years, there's a big storm tunnel for Central City Storm Tunnel. That's in the last 2 years of the 5-year plan. So a lot of different projects there, a lot of water work, a lot of sanitary and storm. So our enterprise funds tend to have the large dollar programs. So just with these 10 programs, that's a little over half of the total public works budget. So it covers a lot. Okay. The public grounds and facilities, here's where I said that they have a sort of a disproportionate amount of dollars in their 2017 program. The big one being the East Side Storage and Maintenance Facility. That's the service area for the solid waste and recycling building. There's a big chunk of that. And then the property and evidence warehouse and the impound lot. So they have a couple of pretty good-sized projects going on in 17 and about a little over twice that in the 5-year plan. Miscellaneous projects is a small category of whatever doesn't fit somewhere else. So we have the art and public places project in there, and then we have the convention center plaza and streetscape for $10.5 million there. So that's the lion's share of the capital budget process and the information. A little bit on operating costs. Everybody has to determine what it's going to cost to build a new capital project or to maintain what they have. They do put this information into their capital requests. It's considered by CLIC in their rating process. And if a capital project has revenues to support a new project, it can still get good marks. But if it's something new and there's not a good way identified as to how it will be maintained, they can actually lose some points in the rating process based on operating costs. We do not build operating costs into their operating budget from the capital side, but it is needing to be managed by the departments. When they request capital dollars, they have to internally determine how they're going to use their operating budget to keep the assets up. Finally, it's difficult for many of these project areas to determine the operating cost implication because, we've got programs that are like street programs like the asphalt pavement resurfacing program, and it's sort of hard to calibrate how that would factor into a reduction in operating costs if we spent a lot of dollars there. All right, we're going to go on to the debt portion now. This is a good story in debt. Is there some questions?
Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Eblin. Before you get into the good story, which we're all excited about, Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Eblin, this might be a fairly obtuse question that we should take offline, but am I looking at this wrong? On slide 7, when you have the net debt bond allocation, it seems right to what we had agreed to with the park board versus public works. It's roughly a 2-to-1 ratio there. But then on slide 9, it looks like the street infrastructure total for the 5-year plan versus neighborhood parks is up closer to 3 times that. And then on slide 13, it looks different still. Am I looking at this wrong? Can you help me understand?
Yeah. Mr. Chair, Councilmember Palmisano, the amount that was agreed to with Park Board is $8 million on top of what they had previously been allocated, which was about $2.5 million. So if you look on slide 7, you see the $10.5 million of net debt bond component to their program. That is what is in the ordinance and the information on the new plan. The public works amount is an allocation of net debt bonds and other sources, and it's not prescribed on a 2-to-1 ratio or any ratio per se. That was just an increase to their existing program. So they have other, bridge programs and traffic signal and different programs that take net debt bonds that they already had, an allocation in the base, what I call sort of the base net debt bond program. So
okay.
you will not see necessarily a ratio that
a similar
makes
one
sense
that carries throughout. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to dig down deeper, it could be in an additional street paving component into the net debt bond program, as opposed to the waterworks or other stuff that would fall under public works that was already out there.
Mr. Chair, that is correct. They have, previously, before this new program got built into the program, they had already had net debt bond allocations into various street projects, and then the new resources are added on top.
Thank you.
A lot also has to be on capacity. I mean, you can say we have a 10 and a 20 going out for the next 20 years, but if you don't have those projects ready to go, we're not going to sell bonds for them.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. And the bond redemption levy, which I'll talk about, will help inform sort of what we can do from a net debt bond perspective each year.
Okay.
So quick zip through to the debt service. Okay, so yesterday we sold $120 million worth of bonds, and the maturities range from 12/1/17 through 12/1/26. And our interest rate that we're going to pay on those over all the maturities is 1.45%. So
that's pretty good value.
That's a pretty good rate. That is below the 10-year Treasury rate right now. Part of that is due to a pretty aggressive structure. We have a lot of bond value in the first couple of years, which are at rates much lower than 1.45. But overall, over the whole bond sale, we achieved a 1.45% rate. So pretty good. I know Mr. Ruff had sent you all the rating agency reports from the getting ready for the sale. So they were all very positive. They're all the same ratings that we had back in 2014, which was the last time we had a formal bond rating. So AAA from Fitch and Standard & Poor's Global, and a AA1 with all stable outlooks. And the stable outlook is pretty important also, because if you're close to being downgraded, they would maybe put you at the same letters like a AA1, but they could have a negative outlook. So that could mean you're sort of teetering on the edge of losing that rating, but these are all stable. So that's a very good positive sign for us as well. Okay. So we're going to get into debt discussion here, and I always do this little thing. We talk a lot about net debt bonds, and basically all that means is it's our property tax supported debt. It's what we levy for through the bond redemption levy, which is a separate dedicated levy that is used exclusively for the payment on these net debt bonds. And then we're going to talk about the debt service budget, which is both principal and interest by function. So the bond redemption levy is the levy that is used for net debt bonds, and this shows an 11-year history of where it's been and where it's going. So you can see back several years ago, over a decade ago, we were levying in that $18 to $20 million range, and essentially that lets you do something less than that in total spending, because that includes the dollars necessary for paying interest on the bonds as well. So our capital program back in those years couldn't be much more than $100 million because of what we were levying. As we came out of the Great Recession, there was a perceived and real need to do more capital, and you can see that steps were taken to increase that levy significantly to allow for us to do a lot more infrastructure work. And that is continuing now in 17 through 21. That levy will continue to grow due to the new program and the dollar amounts that we are allocating in the future. So in 2017, for instance, you can see we're at $38 million for that levy, but we're allocating new spending of $43 million. So we're actually light on the levy, so to speak, but that's because we have unissued bonds, and there's a lot of moving parts and pieces to the debt service side of this. But we are growing that levy to be able to handle those needs as they come due with the actual issuance of debt, because the issuance of debt isn't necessarily tied one for one to the timing of when you spend the money. So we will be just fine by raising these levies over time to accommodate the debt service. Okay. Another word you hear a lot of times in debt is debt capacity. And basically, there's a state statute that determines what our debt capacity is. And this deals with, again, property tax supported debt based on your assessed values. It's 3.33% of our market value. So for 2015, the end result is this thing called the legal debt margin, for which the city has a 1.11 billion legal debt margin. And at this point in time, we have about 100 million or 111 million of debt outstanding. So we've used a small part of that, leaving us $1 billion of capacity to issue legally. But capacity to issue and capacity to pay and willingness to levy to make those payments is a significant difference. And from my standpoint, our capacity to pay is really more important than our capacity to issue, because we have a very good tax base. It's growing, and we are managing our debt so as not to go crazy with the outstanding amounts of debt. So we really do have a lot of capacity to issue, but that ability to raise, for instance, that bond redemption levy is sort of our limiting factor on how much the city would want to go into debt. Okay. This is a picture of our outstanding debt over time. This is part of the good story. Back in 2007, we had $1.15 billion of general obligation debt. At this point in time in 2016, we're estimating that amount to come out at about $655 million. So you can see that we've reduced the debt considerably over time. I think this shows the responsibility of previous city councils and mayors and this city council and mayor in managing the resources for those things. So, as a staff person, I applaud the council's courage to do the things you need to do from a fee standpoint and a taxing standpoint to keep these things as manageable as they are, because we are in a good position to be able to afford the things that are in the budget. Okay. This is a picture of our outstanding debt amount by function. So as you can see, the largest thing is our enterprise funds, currently at about $219 million with the bonds we just sold. So back in the peak, we were at actually about $1.3 billion in 2004, and now we're at about half that, as you can see. Some of those areas that are reducing rapidly now include the convention center. We're sort of in pay down mode on the convention center. We're in pay down mode on the tax increment category. So that is going down significantly, as well as internal service funds. The pension bonds, of course, were paid off back in 2012 already. And the library referendum bonds are in pay down mode. So a lot of this reduction we're seeing is what I would call permanent reduction, because there's not intent in some of these categories to continue to grow the debt. Whereas in enterprise funds, net debt bonds, special assessment, those will grow and fall based on what's in the capital program. So we may actually see some of those rise over time or stabilize. Okay? Any questions before I go on?
Not seeing any, Mr.
Okay. This is just a picture of that outstanding principal. It shows you percentage-wise where that outstanding debt is. So again, a little over a third of it is in enterprise funds. Convention center is the second largest at 15%, but as I said, that one is dropping precipitously. And in fact, we get out of debt entirely in 2020 with the convention center. The tax increment is 11, and it's dropping. So, we have several categories here that are actually going to be falling off or going down precipitously in the future. And this is our 2017 debt service budget. So each year with capital, you're issuing new debt. So you're going into debt to get work done, but you've got scheduled principal that you pay off that helps mitigate that total outstanding debt. So in 2017, we are going to pay off about $119 million worth of debt, and on that we will incur, on a budgeted basis, about $18.5 million in interest. The actual interest will be something less than that because we include in our budget a 3% interest rate on our variable rate debt, but it's been averaging around 1% now. So these are actually probably high on the interest expense side of this. So about $137.5 million in debt payments. This shows where those payments get made. So even though the enterprise fund is the largest amount of outstanding debt, they're not the largest percentage of the debt service budget, and that is due to structuring enterprise fund debt a little bit longer than we do our net debt bonds. We try to keep our net debt bond portfolio relatively short because that's where the lowest interest rates are, and it helps us do the most amount of work with the amounts we allocate for net debt bonds. Okay, and the convention center is about 18% of that budget, and we're going to see that dropping over the next several years. In terms of our budgeted interest over time, we're obviously in a very low interest rate environment right now. And as our debt has gone down, our interest rates that we're paying on that debt has also gone down. So back in 2014, our average interest rate was about a little bit less than 3.5%. Now projected for 17, it's at 2.8. So you can see that we are benefiting from this lower interest rate environment we're in. And again, this is budgeted interest. The actual interest was less than that because we have had variable rate debt throughout this time frame that we were paying significantly less. And it should be known that from 14 through 16, we were budgeting variable interest rate at 5%, but we've recently reduced that for the 17 budget to 3% to get a little bit more realistic and still leave room for rates to increase, which is likely they may increase in 17. Okay. This picture here is the property tax supported debt per person in the city of Minneapolis. Back in 2007, 8, 9, et cetera, when it was the highest, that had to do with having pension bonds outstanding and more of the library debt outstanding. As that debt has gotten paid off, you can see the significant drop in 11 and 12. That was paying off a lot of pension debt, so that was property tax supported. And then we've continued to go down, and now in 16 we've sort of leveled off and maybe are going to rise, and that's partly again due to what we're doing now with the capital program and actually authorizing more net debt and doing more infrastructure work. So I don't anticipate us going back, radically or anything, but we may level out here in that range that we're at right now. In terms of 2016, some of the good news of the story, we've done several things to prepay debt and realize some interest savings. So in May, we paid off $3,975,000 of taxable Block E refunding bonds. That saved the city in future interest expenses of about $1,777,000. The tax increment Midtown Exchange project, we also had excess resources, paid $1,250,000 of that off in May. That saved another $816,000. And we're going to prepay on December 1st 3 maturities of parking ramp bonds. Once we do that, we will forego $1,188,000 of future interest expense on that business function. And then as part of the refundings we just did, part of the $120 million sale, we realized $3,980,000 of savings on 2009 bonds and about $565,000 on the 2009B. And in addition to that, I've got a notation that we had $29,450,000 of bonds outstanding going into that refunding, but with the premiums we got on the bonds, we're actually able to reduce the amount of bonds outstanding to $28,845,000. So not only are we saving interest, we will have less debt outstanding on our books. So that all helps to bolster our financial position and our condition. Okay, getting perilously close to being done here. In terms of variable rate debt, at the end of 2016, we will have somewhere in the neighborhood of 86 million, or about 13% of our portfolio in variable rate debt. We have both tax exempt and taxable variable rate debt. And at the moment, the rates are about 0.65 to 1.11. And in an odd twist of fate, our tax exempt debt is actually costing us more than our taxable bonds right now. And it has to do with the index used to price these bonds and the spread that is associated with them. So we have a very, the LIBOR index and the spread we have on that is actually giving us a rate of less than about 0.67% right now. And that is the debt that's being used for the Target Center renovation project. So we have a $74 million loan, if you will, with Wells Fargo. So as we're incurring expenses, we are going into debt on that particular facility. So we don't have to pay on all bonds outstanding for the whole time. We're slowly going into debt there, and it's in variable rate at a very low rate. That's also the case with Nicollet Mall. One of these tax-exempt loans is a $25 million project that, as we incur expenses on the Nicollet Mall project, we do a drawdown from U.S. Bank in this case and go into debt over time. And both of those will, once those projects are completed, we will be issuing fixed rate bonds to take that variable rate debt out and achieve, a new level of debt service for those functions. Okay, that's about really all I have left. Important budget dates coming up, of course, are November 30th for the public comment on the tax levies and the budget, and December 7th is the public hearing on the budget and the adoption. So that's really all I have, unless there's some questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Evelyn. I am not seeing any questions, which does not mean we do not appreciate the work you've done. We're in great shape, and largely due to the management of our debt function. So thank you very much. I do have a comment from Councilmember Gordon.
Are U.S. Bank and Wells Fargo the only two financial institutions we could go to handle that debt, or do we have any other options?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, we also, when we did these bank loans, had bids from Bank of America and also BMO Harris. So there was more banks involved in the bidding process. U.S. Bank and Wells Fargo were more competitive. So that's why they're selected. Yep.
Thank you very much, Mr. Evelyn.
Thank you.
Thank you. You guys have finished. I've got another 2 minutes if you wanted to stretch it out. But I think it was a terrific idea to have the Public Works, which is the most significant investment that we make, and as one department, coincide with what's happening from the debt perspective and the capital projects, especially highlighting the great work with the neighborhood parks street funding program, and then going through the process that we use to make sure that we were putting that additional funding opportunities into a credible process that was open and transparent, and certainly addressed some of the equity issues. So happy to give you any final comments. You've got about 45 seconds.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, a final thank you on behalf of the Mayor's Office and of Public Works for our opportunity to present the Mayor's 2017 recommended budget. And a thank you to the council members for your leadership in passing the ordinance, which led to our presentation today, showing you what the next 5 to 6 years of our streets capital program looks like. And thank you very much to the Public Works staff who have helped me thoroughly understand our budget and be prepared for this today. We look forward to your questions as this unfolds over the next 2 months, and also to the upcoming public hearings. Thank you again.
Good. Thank you very much, everybody. I think we're going to be standing adjourned until 1:30 when we'll be able to take up the budget presentation for Community Planning and Economic Development Department, followed by the Regulatory Services Department. So we'll see you later this afternoon. Thank you very much.